It's 3 a.m. and you're staring at the ceiling. Your phone is face down on the nightstand, glowing faintly through the case. You tell yourself not to check it, you check it anyway. 30 seconds become 10 minutes, 10 minutes become an hour. You lie there convinced something is wrong with you, that your body has betrayed you, that real sleepers don't wake up like this. But the real answer is far stranger. This middle of the night waking isn't a malfunction. It might be one of the oldest, most ordinary things your body still remembers how to do. Let's start with what you think you know about sleep. You probably picture it as one long, unbroken block. Lights off at 11, lights on at 7, 8 hours, start to finish, no interruptions. Anything less counts as broken sleep. That model is barely 200 years old. Before the light bulb, night didn't work that way at all. The historian Roger Ekirch spent over a decade combing through diaries, court depositions, and medical texts from pre-industrial Europe, and what he found rewired how scientists think about sleep entirely. People didn't sleep through the night, they slept in two distinct shifts. They called the first shift first sleep. It began an hour or two after dusk and lasted 3 or 4 hours. Then they woke up, not in a panic, not reaching for anything to numb the moment. They woke gently, the way you might surface from a nap, and they stayed awake for an hour, sometimes two. This waking hour even had its own name, the watch. What did people actually do during the watch? They prayed. They talked quietly with a partner lying beside them. They got up and tended a dying fire, or slipped outside to check the animals, or simply lay in the dark, turning a problem over in their mind. Some told each other dreams while they were still fresh and vivid. Others used the stillness to think through the day just gone, undisturbed by anyone needing anything from them. Then, when the mind settled on its own, second sleep came and carried them through until morning. Doesn't that sound a little like your 3 a.m.? Ekirch found this pattern referenced so casually in so many unrelated documents that it clearly wasn't an oddity worth explaining at the time. It was simply what night felt like for almost everyone for most of recorded history. Court records mention it in passing, the way you might mention brushing your teeth. Physicians wrote about the best hours to conceive a child, and they meant the hours during the watch, when both partners were calm and rested from first sleep. Even literature assumed you already knew about it. Old plays and poems reference characters waking for the watch without ever stopping to explain what that means. The same way a modern script might mention someone checking their phone without footnoting what a phone is. Everyone in the audience already lived it. So why does the same waking now feel like an emergency? Think about the language alone. You don't say you woke for the watch. You say you can't sleep. One phrase describes a routine, the other describes a failure. Nothing about the biology changed between then and now. The story you tell yourself about it changed completely. Here's where the story gets more complicated and more interesting. The sleep scientist Jerome Siegel wanted to know whether this two-shift pattern, biphasic sleep, was something ancient and universal, baked into human biology long before candles and clocks existed. So he did something almost nobody had done before. He studied sleep in three traditional societies that still live without electric light: the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, and the Tsimane of Bolivia. He gave volunteers in each group small sleep tracking devices and recorded what their actual nights looked like, away from any assumptions about what natural sleep should be. The results surprised almost everyone, including Siegel himself. These groups didn't split their sleep into two distinct shifts. They slept in one continuous stretch, averaging under 7 hours a night. They didn't nap to make up the difference, and remarkably, none of the three languages had a native word for insomnia. So which is it? Was Ekirch's segmented sleep an ancient biological default written into your genes, or just a side effect of long, pre-industrial European winters? The honest answer is probably both, depending on where exactly you draw the line in human history. Think about what a winter night in Northern Europe actually looked like before electricity. Darkness could stretch past 14 hours, sometimes longer the farther north you went. That's far more time in bed than any body actually needs to recover. A wakeful hour in the middle of all that darkness isn't a glitch in the system. It's what naturally happens when you give a sleep cycle more raw darkness than it requires to do its job. The Hadza, the San, and the Tsimene live much closer to the equator, where nights run closer to 11 or 12 hours year-round, every season, with very little variation. Less darkness means less idle time in bed, which means less opportunity for that middle of the night gap to ever open up in the first place. In other words, your sleep doesn't ignore the length of the night around it. It adapts to it, almost like a tide finding the shape of whatever shoreline it's given. And that single detail changes how you should think about your own 3 a.m. You don't live near the equator in a dwelling lit only by embers. You live with floodlit streets, blue lit screens, and a bedroom that almost never reaches true, total darkness. Your circadian system, the internal clock that anthropologist Carol Wortman has spent decades studying across dozens of cultures, calibrates itself to light, not to the numbers glowing on your nightstand. What did Wortman's cross cultural research actually find? Across the traditional communities she studied, people wound down gradually as natural light faded outside, with nothing artificial competing against that signal or delaying it. Their evenings dimmed the way the sky dimmed. Yours probably does the opposite. Bright screens, bright kitchens, bright bathroom mirrors, a phone screen held 8 inches from your face right before bed. All of it tells your brain it's still broad daylight long after the sun went down hours ago. So, when you finally switch off the lights at midnight, you're often not winding down at all. You're crashing abruptly from full daylight straight into total dark, with no twilight in between to ease the transition. Think about what your evening actually looks like. Overhead, lights at full brightness through dinner, a laptop screen inches from your face while you answer one more email, a phone scrolling in bed, held close, its glow landing directly on your retinas at the exact hour your brain should be receiving the opposite signal. Every one of those lights is telling your circadian system the same false thing. It's still daytime, stay alert, don't release the hormones that prepare you for sleep yet. Your ancestors had no version of this. Firelight is dim and orange, nothing like the cool blue-white glow of a screen, and it flickers low to the ground rather than beaming directly into the eyes. Within an hour or two of sunset, the strongest light in their world was already fading. Within an hour or two of sunset, the strongest light in yours might still be a television. And when you wake at 3 a.m., your brain doesn't have the watch to fall back on. No ritual, no quiet expectation that this is simply part of how night unfolds. Instead, you have a phone, a bright rectangle promising distraction, sitting right there on the nightstand, paired with an anxious mind that's already started spiraling about being awake at all. That's the real difference between you and your ancestors. They expected to wake up, you don't. They had something to do with the waking, you don't. This is worth sitting with for a second. What if the waking itself was never the actual problem? For most of human history, that quiet hour in the dark wasn't wasted time. It was some of the only true stillness a person got in an entire day. No tasks waiting, no noise, no one needing anything from you, just a mind, briefly alone with itself, doing the kind of slow, unhurried processing that daylight almost never allows. Some researchers studying this historical pattern have even suggested it may have supported memory consolidation and quiet creative problem solving, your brain filing away the day's events while the body rested around it, undisturbed. Modern sleep culture, by contrast, treats any wakefulness as failure. You've absorbed the idea that 8 unbroken hours is the only acceptable outcome. So the moment you stir at 3 a.m., your mind doesn't settle into anything resembling the watch. It panics instead. It starts catastrophizing about tomorrow's exhaustion, replaying tomorrow's meeting, counting backward from how many hours of sleep you have left. It reaches for a screen that floods the room with exactly the wavelength of light that delays sleep even further. You don't have insomnia, you have a 3 a.m. with nowhere to put it. So what happens if you give it somewhere to go? Some sleep researchers who study Ekirch's findings now suggest a strange but oddly comforting reframe. Stop treating the middle of the night wake up as an emergency to be solved. Let the room stay dark instead of lighting it up. Let the mind wander instead of scroll. Give it a few quiet, undemanding minutes, the way the watch once worked, before even trying to force yourself back to sleep. Will that fix every sleepless night? Probably not. Insomnia is real, and stress, caffeine, screens, and 100 other unmistakably modern pressures all play a genuine role in disrupting sleep. None of that disappears just because you understand its history. But knowing the history does change the meaning of the moment. You're not broken, you're not failing at the one basic thing your body should supposedly know how to do effortlessly, the way it digests food or heals a cut without being told to. Consider what your ancestors never had to ask themselves at 3 a.m. They never wondered if waking up meant something was wrong with them. They never reached for a device that would compare their sleep to a stranger's or quietly punish them with a low score on an app the next morning. They simply accepted the watch as part of the night shape, the same way they accepted that winter days were short and summer days were long. You inherited their biology without inheriting their explanation for it. That gap is where the anxiety lives. You're running ancient software on hardware that hasn't changed much in 50,000 years inside a night that no longer looks anything like the one it was originally built for. So tonight, when the clock reads 3 a.m. and your eyes open in the dark, try something different than reaching for your phone. Lie still. Let your eyes adjust slowly to the dark instead of flooding them with light. Let your mind do what minds have always done in that quiet hour: wander, sort, remember, settle, the way it did for nearly every person who ever lived before you. You're not stuck in the dark, you're keeping the watch.